Chapter 54, Testing Ling Jian. Pooh. The shaft of a short knife buried itself deeply into the bodyguard's heart. It unerringly pierced the heart of the guard. Putong. Ling knelt down on the floor, howling as he burst into tears. Ling Tian felt a wave of guilt. If he personally took action, the bodyguards would not have needed to die so meaninglessly. However, if he were to take action now, the plans he had painstakingly built would come to naught. Not only would it be a wasted effort, he would also become the target of everyone. Closing his eyes, he thought, "Brothers, please forgive me." Turning his head back, his eyes had already regained their original clarity. Looking at the 24 men dressed in white who were apprehended, his eyes flashed with killing intent. A blood iron warrior moved towards Ling Tian, saying, "Young noble, how should we deal with these people? Do we alert the magistrate or bring them back to our residence?" Ling Tian pondered for a while, before replying, "There's no rush," as the corners of his mouth curled up in a cruel smile. That blood iron warrior blinked a few times in confusion, before answering with a "acknowledged." He then returned back to his original spot. Their mission was to ensure Ling Tian's safety, and for other matters, he would ignore without exceptions. As for the matter of handling the captives, he only asked out of formality's sake, just like how he did so in front of Ling Zhou in the army. These 12 blood iron warrior was the result of the discussion Ling Tian had with Madame Ling earlier on in the morning. Towards his grandmother, Ling Tian did not actually hide his own plans, but rather simply pushed the responsibility towards his master. When Ling Tian left the residence, Madame Ling felt extremely unsettled about it. Ever since she found out about Ling Kong's scheme, she knew that he definitely would not give up just like that, and would definitely make use of the opportunity to get rid of his eyesore, Ling Tian. It was only after Ling Tian vowed that his master would be by his side protecting him did Madame Ling finally agree reluctantly. However, she still decided to assign 12 blood iron warriors by his side. The 12 blood iron warriors stood at attention before clearing the remnants of the battle without prior instruction. As they passed by Ling crying his heart out, their eyes subconsciously flashed with traces of contempt and disdain. If one could not accept life and death, he would be better off staying at home and taking care of the children. What bother coming to the battlefield to engage in killing? On the battlefield, every second would mean the death of tens or even hundreds of your brothers, dying in the most tragic ways possible. If everyone were to be like this crying jerk over here, they would probably end up as meat paste too. In war, time to mourn was a luxury no one could afford. One cry would negatively affect the rest of the soldiers' morale. As such, the actions carried out by Ling was a chargeable crime for disturbing the heart of soldiers. Taking in this scene, Ling Tian could not help but let out a sigh. Both parties were the elite among the elites, and yet such difference could be seen by someone who had undergone 100 battles and yet lived to tell the tale. He lightly spoke, "They have not been baptized by the killings on the battlefield, and thus naturally do not have any self-control. Such is human nature, they should not be blamed." Hearing this sentence, a few of the blood iron warriors froze in mid-step. Turning back, they deeply stared at their young master. Ling Tian merely curled up the corners of his mouth in return, before turning his head to address his bodyguards, "Ling Yi, bring the captives over. I want to question them." In a short while, all 24 captives were thrown in front of Ling Tian, forming a group. Each of them revealed a look of fear, staring at this delicate child in front of them which looked like a pretty lady. None of them knew what was going to happen next. Ling Jian walked up to the carriage, calling for Ling Jian to come over. As for Mr. Qin, Ling Tian made him stay in the carriage as he was afraid that what was going to happen next would contain more than a little bloodshed. Thus, he was afraid that the old man would not be able to take it. He even pulled the curtains of the chariot shut in consideration. Mr. Qin was deeply appreciative of Ling Tian's intention. Since he had some form of fear towards killing and bloodshed, he wisely decided to continue hiding in the carriage to recuperate. Kicking one of the short swords on the ground towards Ling Jian, Ling Tian spoke blandly and coldly, "Ling Jian, this shall be your first test. I'll give you 2 hours, I want to have the answers to everything I want to know. As for the idea, you think of it yourself. If you cannot accomplish this, then you don't need to follow me back. Take a bag of silver and roam the world." With a caw sound, Ling Tian nonchalantly threw a bag of silver onto the snowy ground. He then turned back to sit on the pulling shaft of the chariot, and closed his eyes slightly, showing no interest in what was happening next. At this time, the 12 blood iron warriors had already gathered the corpses of the white-robed men together, and simply covered them with the fallen snow before returning. They realized that Ling Tian was about to take care of those captured white-robed men, but had actually handed over the task to a frail 7 to 8-year-old kid. All of them were flabbergasted, and immediately came forward to try to help. However, Ling Tian's voice traveled over, bearing chilly undertones, "Nobody is to help. All of you had better stand one side and simply watch. Let Ling Jian do whatever he wants. If anyone lets out even a squeak, he can forget about staying in the Ling residence." Everyone simultaneously froze in mid-step. After a while, all of them awkwardly retracted their legs. The glances they shot towards Ling Tian was not only of amazement but also of some fear. Such resoluteness was something that even the great General Ling Zhou did not have. Eyeing the short sword on his feet, Ling Jian did not bother to pick it up, instead walking towards one of the blood iron warriors. Without prior consent, he stretched out his hand and drew out the steel sword hung on that man's waist with a kyang sound. That steel sword was so heavy that Ling Jian actually needed both hands in order to lift it up. That small and frail frame seemed to be shaking, though no one was sure if it was due to excitement or fear. Ling Jian felt his heart boiling, finally a test in which he had been waiting for. This day has finally arrived. Not only was it sudden, the contents of this test could be seen to be extremely bloody. Furthermore, if he could not pass it and achieve what the young noble asked for, then, his entire future would be ruined in just this moment today. Dragging the sword, Ling Jian hung his head down slightly as he moved in the direction of the 24 white-robed men. His hair messily hung down from his forehead, dancing before his eyes and covering them. At this moment, everyone felt that this kid suddenly exuded a gloomy and oppressive aura. Ling Jian dragged the sword in front of the white-robed men. He solemnly spoke, "You guys heard him, I only have 2 hours. Thus, time is not on my side. I hope that you can voluntarily tell me everything that my young noble wants to know, then everyone would remain happy." Though his voice may have sounded immature, it was cold as ice. Hearing his words, a white-robed man coldly laughed in return, "Why should we tell you? Little kid, do you think that by putting on such a face you can scare someone? This daddy here came here today not expecting that I would live to tell the tale." A strangled scream suddenly resonated through the air, lingering in the atmosphere. Before he had finished speaking, Ling Jian's eyes had flashed with coldness, and the sword held in his both hands had unhesitatingly hacked down on that man. Chapter 55, Ling Jian's Interrogation. Blood splattered and that white-robed man's left arm was amputated at his shoulder. Fresh blood gushed out from the open wound like a fountain. It sprayed onto his accomplices, effectively blinding them. An intense nauseating feeling surged from all of them, however, those beside the amputated white-robed man did not even dare to make so much as a squeak. They forcefully swallowed back down the bile and vomit that was rising up their throats. At the same time, the glance they shot to the solitary figure of Ling Jian was filled with fear. The surroundings had already turned deathly silent. Even those blood iron warriors who were standing by the side did not expect this 9-year-old child to be so decisively ruthless in his actions. Not achieving his aim after merely one sentence, he did not hesitate to bring his sword down. Not like that, his actions were so vicious, crippling the guy in one move. The Ling residents' bodyguards around were turning white in fear, their throats making gurgling sounds. Their Adamas apples were bobbing up and down as though in exercise, making them seem like they were continuously swallowing something. The Blood Iron warriors could not help but turn to look at Ling Tian, who had his butt firmly planted at the carriage shaft. However, they only saw an expression of blandness as he coldly overlooked the scene, as though the matter of an amputation was commonplace and not worthy of his attention. It was as if he had taken a look at the clouds floating and the breeze blowing. All the bodyguards on scene could not help but feel a sense of respect bubbling from their hearts as they thought, these two fellows aren't simple. Ling Jian remained unperturbed, with the steel sword in his hand slowly dripping blood onto the snow as it ran down the blade. Plop plop sounds were heard as they landed drop by drop onto the snow. Coldly looking at his victim, which had already fainted due to the pain, Ling Jian continued in a level tone, "My time is short, and I don't want to use punishment. That is too troublesome. I ask now, can you give me what I want?" "Don't want to use punishment." The Blood Iron warriors which were standing by the side, all felt like knocking their heads on the ground upon hearing this sentence. "How else do you want to punish? One chop, and you already lopped off his arm. This is not considered punishment? Isn't your sentence a little too amusing?" Ling Jian stood there, head lowered and sword dangled down, silently waiting. As he waited for the white-robed men to talk, he silently counted to 10. Even after he had finished, there was no sound coming from any of them. Ling Jian coldly snorted in his heart, before raising the sword. He chopped down once again, without even looking his time. "No. Spare me. Ill talk." Yet another agonized howl sounded, and the second arm was separated forever from another white-robed man. As the arm lay on the ground, its fingers seemed to still be twitching. A few drops of the fresh blood splattered onto Ling Jian's face, slowly sliding off. It drew a few devious scars on his pale face as it flowed downwards. However, Ling Jian remained unmoving as a statue, not even bothering to wipe it off. Looking at the white-robed man who had begged moments before his sword cut away his arm, Ling Jian spoke with hints of apology. "I am sorry, you spoke too late, so I couldn't retract my sword in time." Though there were blood trails on his face, his tone was still calm, as though he was making daily conversation. It was as though he had accidentally dropped the teacup at his neighbor's place and was apologizing. "Oh, I am so sorry, I broke your teacup." Seeing this frail little child, a chill rose unhindered from the hearts of the surrounding Blood Iron warriors, causing them to shiver involuntarily. They thought of what they did when they were around 7 or 8, compared to this little guy who was waving his sword and cutting people as though it was common occurrence. Everyone had the same thought in their hearts, was this really a child? He looks more like a little demon. As for the second white-robed man who had had his arm cut off, his facial features were distorted terribly. However, he did not faint, instead rolling about the snow with his other hand holding onto the stump of his arm. Wherever he rolled turned into a patch of red. In his extreme pain, he continuously groaned, unable to even speak coherently. He did not even have the strength to properly groan out, only short breaths coming out from his mouth. Ling Jian only looked at him blandly, before tranquilly turning over to look at his third victim. He simply asked, "What about you? Willing to speak?" His tone was gentle, as though asking a neighbor what he was having for dinner tonight. That white-robed man's eyes were wide with fear, seeing this azure-like child in front of him actually throwing him this question. He was overwhelmed by fear. After letting out a squeak, he actually fainted. Ling Jian flew into a rage, hollering, "FK your mom, how dare you play dead?" The sword on his hand hacked down and immediately blood flew into the air. His blade went up, fell, went up again. Fresh blood spilled out unceasingly, and Ling Jian had already turned into a blood man. "Ill speak. Ill speak. No, Ill speak, I am willing to speak, please let me speak." The crowd of white-robed men jostled to withdraw, Their faces already turned to that of extreme fear. All of them fought to speak, afraid that this monster would target them next. Their voices were so loud that even the deaf could hear. Ling Jian coldly snort, pointing the sword towards a slightly plump man. "You! Speak!" On the point of the sword, sticky blood pooled there bit by bit, the blood dropped slowly, increasing in size, then dripping down. That white-robed man was so afraid that he started leaking from both his front and back, deflating onto the ground as he spoke. "Little master, no, grandfather, what do you want to ask? This little one will reveal all he knows, and if there is any falsehood, then may my family die an unjust death." Under the coercion of fear, he actually swore and cursed himself. Ling Jian's facial expression relaxed slightly. "Say everything that you know." Yes. This little one is called Zhang Dahu. I am a disciple of the Dark Night Hall belonging to the Violent Wind Gang. This time we are here under the orders of our gang leader. This little one only knows that this time we were supposed to assassinate a 5 to 6-year-old kid, and we were supposed to silence all others that accompany the kid. Other than that, the more panicked he got, the more he could not remember what he wanted to say, and he could not help but start sweating bullets. Who gave the mission? Who paid you to do so? Ah. This matter, little one really doesn't know. Seeing how Ling Jian's face got gradually colder, the white-robed man Zhang Dahu could only beg for mercy, and knock his head on the ground as though he was smashing garlic. What is the name of your gang leader? How many people are there in your gang? Where is the headquarters? Locations of your branches? Number of people in your Dark Night Hall? Ling Jian did not bother too much. So long as he thought of that question, he would spit it out towards him like a cannon. Chapter 56, Blood Iron Warriors. From what Zhang Dahu confessed, everyone knew that the Violent Wind Gang was a large gang near the capital which was formed around 5 years ago. It was even larger than the Blood Rose Hall which killed Ling Jian's parents. The head of the gang, Zhou Kuangfeng, was a martial arts expert as well. In the Violent Wind Gang, there was a total of 4 halls with 600+ people. They were the Dark Night Hall, which specialized in assassinations and information gathering. Gold Jade Hall, in charge of all the various gambling dens and prostitution businesses and the largest source of income for the Violent Wind Gang. Tiger Leopard Hall, the force which the Violent Wind Gang showed on the surface in order to hide their true strength. Law Enforcement Hall, carrying out any punishments within the gang and also the strongest force in the Violent Wind Gang. Facing Ling Jian, all of these captured white-dressed men became as obedient as kittens and spilled all the beans. If there was someone who did not have adequate information, the others would snatch for the opportunity to add on with what they knew. They all looked to be extremely loyal, afraid that they did not give enough details and enraging this little devil. There was one of them who even said how many concubines the gang leader had and the sequence which he would find each of the concubines every month. It turns out that this white-dressed man did not have good looks and had a poor family. Even though he was so old already, he was still unable to find a wife and cultivated the habit of eavesdropping. As Ling Tian listened by the side, he broke out in cold sweat. As he realized that there was nothing more which can be interrogated out of them, Ling Jian stopped his interrogation. He then organized whatever he questioned and reported them to Ling Tian. Everyone then saw this small figure walk towards Ling Tian, his body so skinny to the point a gust of wind can blow him down. But, even the Blood Iron Warriors who were numb to killing and can laugh on the battlefield had a tinge of fear and worry in their eyes as they looked towards him. There was even a vague trace of respect. Ling Tian had already heard everything he needed and naturally did not pay attention to Ling Jian's report. But in his heart, Ling Tian was still pretty satisfied towards Ling Jian's performance. The process of the interrogation was extremely swift and effective. After listening to the contents which were interrogated, he already had a good understanding of the Violent Wind Gang. Furthermore, Ling Jian only used half the time which Ling Tian gave him. He can be said to have passed with flying colors. Without surprise, no one knew who the client for this mission was. They only knew that 100,000 taels of silver was paid and a gang received a mysterious mission. The only requirement of the mission was to kill everyone present. As such, before these white-dressed men took action, they still did not know who they were about to kill. It was only after they saw the appearance of the Blood Iron Warriors did they understand that the person they were supposed to kill was an important person in the Ling mansion. At that moment, all of these white-dressed men cursed in their hearts, killing someone from the Ling mansion in the capital. Isn't he this just committing suicide? Are they tired of living? They all could not help but begin to hate the gang leader, Zhou Kuangfeng, as well. It doesn't matter if we did not know, don't tell me you did not know either? For 100,000 taels of silver, you sold the lives of us brothers out. It can be imagined just what kind of a revenge the Ling family would take if this mission was unsuccessful. The consequences are definitely not something which a small violent wind gang is able to endure. To the side, there was a loud puking sound which sounded. The sound was so intense that anyone who heard it would think that the person was puking out all of his internal organs. Everyone turned to look and they were startled. That person who was puking while holding the carriage for support was the previously cold-blooded Ling Jian. At this moment, he could no longer stand up properly as he squatted down. He already had nothing to puke out as only his clear stomach acids were puked out. Ling Jian was a 9-year-old child after all. With the pressure of needing to leave the Ling mansion if he did not pass, he used the most extreme and cruel interrogation method without hesitation. However, it was after all his first time facing such a bloody scene, especially since all of these were created by him. His stomach had long been unable to take the discomfort already. Now that the pressure was over and the bloody scenes appeared in his head again, he could not help but vomit. A trace of heartache then flashed through a leader of the Blood Iron Warriors. He then could not help but say to Ling Tian, "Young noble's training method is indeed effective. But to a child, it may be a little too cruel." Ling Tian was stunned for a moment. This person isn't he simple? He is actually able to tell that I am trying to train Ling Jian. He then turned around as he looked towards that Blood Iron Warrior with a smile which wasn't a smile. However, he did not say a thing but only sized him up with a strange laughter. After which, Ling Tian still did not say anything but only gave a profound smile. This leader of the Blood Iron Warrior was puzzled as he also sized himself up following Ling Tian's gaze. Only after a while did he understand, if not for the life and death battles in the battlefield, will there be the Blood Iron Warriors? After he understood Ling Tian's meaning, he became silent. After sizing him up for a moment, Ling Tian had an idea in his head as he asked, "What is your name? What is your rank?" This Blood Iron Warrior was stunned for a moment before reacting. "Your subordinate is called Feng Mao. I am a personal troop of the martial tent." Personal troop? Ling Tian was surprised. Someone like him was only able to be a small little personal troop? "Don't tell me Dad has these many talents?" Feng Mao also became embarrassed as he said with a red face, "This subordinate was originally a captain of a 100-man platoon. But because of my bad temper, I had a conflict with one of the deputy general. In a moment of rage, I actually beat the deputy general up. In order to appease the crowd, I was demoted to being a personal troop." Ling Tian nodded his head. "My father really knows how to abuse his authority for his personal means. Keeping such a blockhead with exceptional martial arts by his side." But the way Ling Tian saw it, this Feng Mao will not be satisfied by being a puny personal troop. At least, he can be a vanguard or division commander in the army. However, he was a mere 100-man captain in the past. It seems that Dad really has a few talents who are not well utilized. For such a talent to be a personal troop, isn't he this such a waste? Ling Tian's eyes began to spin as he laughed to himself. Then, he asked, "How many Blood Iron Warriors are there in the army?" Feng Mo then replied without thinking, "There are a total of 120 personal troops such as myself who are called Blood Iron Warriors. They are divided into 10 sections with a section commander and 2 in each section." Ling Tian then nodded his head as he thought about the army's structure from the past life. In his past life, the smallest unit would be formed by 10 people with a commander and 2 as well. As he thought about his previous life, he could not help but go into a daze. As he saw Feng Mo staring at him with a weird look, Ling Tian broke out of his daze as he smiled. Feng Mo, you have already seen that my circumstances are also extremely dire. There will be people who will kill me anytime. I want to tell my father to transfer a section of Blood Iron Warriors over. I wonder if you're willing? Chapter 57, Plotting Against the Violent Wind Gang. Ling Tian thought to himself, father has 120 of such people around him. There will definitely be many with nothing to do. It shouldn't be too much for me to ask a dozen or so from him. He should not really be affected also. Feng Mo was stunned, so this young noble had such an idea. He actually wants to steal men from his father. Only after being stunned for a moment did he say, "There is no willing or not willing to, as long as the general gives his command, this subordinate will do anything. In other words, I cannot promise you right now, and I am also not very willing." The phrase "this subordinate will do anything" already shows his unwillingness. However, as though Ling Tian did not understand the hidden meaning behind those words, he said happily, "Then I shall go back and tell that to my father and see if he is willing." Ha ha ha. At the same time, he thought in his heart, of course I want to go and ask him. I'll fail for sure or even suffer a beating. It is best to just let grandmother go and ask him for such a thing. She'll definitely succeed. Feng Mo was speechless in his heart. Don't tell me I wasn't obvious enough? This young noble actually couldn't tell? Black lines inevitably filled his face. At this moment, Ling Jian had already puked to the point he had no more strength as he lay on the floor while breathing heavily. Noticing that he had finished vomiting, Ling Tian asked Feng Mo to carry Ling Jian and place him in the carriage. At this moment, Ling Yi regained his senses as he said with concern, young noble, we should immediately inform the grandsire and ask him to catch the members of the violent wind gang up. We should eradicate them from their roots to spare ourselves from future trouble." Ling Tian then rolled his eyes. "By the time you thought about that, it is too late already. Catch the violent wind gang? Catch them for what? It is all just a waste of time, you will not be able to catch anyone." Ling Tian shook his head as he said that. Ling Yi was depressed. Why won't we be able to catch them? With all of their properties, can they possibly escape? Ling Tian was completely speechless as he scolded a while later, "Are you an idiot? If you were the violent wind gang, failed to assassinate the young noble of the largest family in the capital and even got many of your men caught, would you still remain in the same place to get caught?" At this moment, all of the important people in the violent wind gang would have ran far away from the capital by now. Where would we find them then? The city would only be left with the small fries. What good would it be to catch them? Catch them so we have to feed them. What will they know? Stupid. After thinking for a moment, Ling Tian continued, "If all of you had been able to catch all of the attackers, then the violent wind gang would have disappeared from the face of the earth by now." Ling Yi's face turned red as he took a bow in embarrassment and left. As Ling Tian looked at the many white-dressed men who were tied up, he thought for a moment before saying, "I originally planned to kill all of you." As he said that, all of their faces changed as they pleaded for mercy. Ling Tian then continued, "Now, I want all of you to report where you stay, number of people at home and your name. All of these will be recorded before I send you back. Record it all. Remember, after you return, do whatever you have to do. But if even a single of you escape, all of the 23 who remains will have their whole family executed together with them." A few days later, I will send someone to take over the businesses of the Violent Wind Gang. If you guys cooperate well, this young noble may continue to give you your jobs in future. I can also ensure that you will be better off than before for sure. Release them." All of the white-dressed men stared at each other blankly. They never imagined that this would be the ending. The person they were trying to kill was the young master of General Ling. They had thought that they would either be killed or imprisoned for life. They never imagined that the young noble would let them off so easily. Even after they were all untied, they still felt that they were in a dream and did not believe that it was real. Ling Tian then frowned as he said, "All of you still aren't leaving? Don't tell me you expect me to send you guys back with a carriage?" Only then did they regain their senses. Looking at the small body of Ling Tian, they all knelt on the floor. "We thank the young noble for letting us go. As long as young noble is willing, we are all willing to follow the young noble. Even if we were to become your horses or cows, we will repay the young noble for your kindness." Ling Tian frowned and replied, "Become my horses or cows? All of you still do not have the rights to do so. Accomplish this matter properly first. As for the other things, we'll talk about that in future. Remember, none of you are to reveal the matters today. If news were to be spread out, I will hold all of you accountable." Ling Tian intentionally did not reject them completely, leaving them with a glimmer of hope. All of the white-dressed men were elated as they gave their word to Ling Tian. They had also heard that all of the higher echelons within the Violent Wind Gang would be gone for sure. When they return, their safety would definitely not be an issue. After giving thanks, they supported each other and left. Ling Tian looked at their unsteady figures and frowned. Then, he shouted, "Come back!" All of them were shocked as they turned back. Ling Tian then pointed at a bag of silver which he threw on the ground. "Take these silver with you. Give more to those who lost their limbs." All of the white-dressed men were extremely thankful, with some of the more emotional ones even crying. They then picked up the silver on the floor and left. The guards of the Ling family and the Blood Iron warriors were all extremely puzzled. All of these white-dressed men were all extremely vile and evil creatures. After interrogating any news from them, they should be executed on the spot. At the very least, they should be sent to the authorities. Why were they released so easily? Isn't this going too easy on them? Looking at their puzzled faces, Ling Tian could not help but silently scold them for being stupid in his heart. This Violent Wind Gang is just an ordinary gang. But if they were in the hands of my Ling family, they would become the largest gang in the capital in a short time. At that time, the Ling mansion would have another source of income and more information. The gambling dens and prostitution business which the Violent Wind Gang had was not just wealth. It was also the fastest way to get news. At that time, I am completely confident that I will be able to control this gang to grasp all the news within the capital. This is not something which can be measured by wealth. With the strength of the Ling family now, if they had an underground strength like the Violent Wind Gang, it was akin to adding wings to a tiger. The biggest problem now was that Ling Tian had to find someone who he can trust to be the gang leader. Only after that would he worry about growing the gang. Ling Tian touched his chin as he looked at the Blood Iron warriors. After looking at them for a moment, he could not help but chuckle. His smile was just so devious. After Ling Tian and his guards crossed the lake and entered the forest, a figure suddenly appeared. Looking at the carriage which was long gone, he thought for a moment and let out an inaudible sigh. Then, he rushed back to the capital at full speed. Chapter 58, King Fu's Courtyard. Translator, David. Editor, Sal. Looking from afar, King Fu's courtyard looked like a black shadowy ruin. However, when Ling Tian and group approached it, they collectively sucked in a breath of cold air. Firstly, this courtyard of King Fu occupied a space that was large beyond imagination. Based on Ling Tian's estimates, it should be more than 1 hectare in length, bigger than the current Ling residence by at least 2 times. Secondly, was the damage caused to the courtyard. It had long exceeded even Mr. Qin's. It just needs a bit of refurbishing, following which it can be used estimates. Broken tiles were strewn everywhere, and more than half of the walls had already collapsed, with weeds overgrowing the entire place. Whatever spare materials that could be used for rebuilding had long disappeared, to the point that even the glazed roof tiles had been totally scavenged off. Occasionally, one could see a beggar dressed in rags, appearing from the ruins with a hair looking like reeds. They would all stare at the group of high-ranked nobility in fear, and would quickly duck back into the ruins with a swoosh sound, never to show their faces again. As everyone followed Ling Tian to walk on the original alleyway, which was now unfit for people to walk across, a nauseating stench assailed their noses. Ever since people stopped showing interest in this King Fu's courtyard, it turned into a temporary shelter for the refugees and beggars. Furthermore, it was obvious from a glance that excrement lay all over the place. A look of embarrassment and shame appeared on Mr. Qin's face. Not only him, the remaining bodyguards, including Ling Yi and the Blood Iron warriors, all furrowed their brows. This broken-down land disgusted people at a glance, making people want to take a detour instead of walking through it. There seemed to be no value in this land at all. Ling Tian, however, remained passive, striding amongst the ruins of the courtyard, sizing up every corner, as if he did not smell the fishy stench which was vomit-inducing. What he looked at was not this scenery of defeat and desolation, but rather the prototype and design used in the previous construction of the entire courtyard. On the left, there seems to have been plans to erect a library there. The front should be the main residence of the king, and seeing the supports on the right, with the random placement of the artificial hills, it should have been a garden. The back palace hall seemed to be slightly higher than the main, with around 3 stories. Looks like King Fu also had a daughter? This delicately designed building was obviously an embroidery room. What made Ling Tian happiest was that all the way at the rear of this plot of land was an empty plot of land, with an obvious separation from the palaces. Right now, it was overgrown with weeds, with no former semblance, yet in Ling Tian's eyes, this should have been a martial arts practice ground. It would be the perfect place to drill any soldiers. At the front of King Fu's courtyard, greenery as well as the river circled around it like a belt, and one could see a willow tree grove from afar. The courtyard was situated directly beside Mount Victory. While the mountain was not particularly towering, its rear was filled with steep and precipitous cliffs. Other than coming in from the front where the mountain had gentle slopes, those who tried going from the rear only had one ending death, no matter man or beast. There was no possibility of getting up even by a rope, which made for an exceptionally good protective screen. Looking at this position, Mount Victory was likely to be considered inside the territory of King Fu's courtyard. With mountains on one side and a river on the other side, this was indeed an ideal place to stay at. The more Ling Tian observed, the more satisfied he was. While restoration and renovation would be quite a hefty sum, it would definitely turn into the most exceptional base of operations one could have once it was repaired. Thinking up till here, Ling Tian could not help but feel surprised. I am not the only one in the city who has foresight, so why has nobody made inquiries regarding this place? Seeing that the sky had gotten dark, with the sun already setting, Ling Tian decided to rush back through the night to the Ling residence. This time, his enemies were not aware of the existence of the Blood Iron warriors, and thus suffered a disadvantage. Were they to organize another counterattack, it would be unlikely for his men would not be able to get out alive. After checking out King Fu's courtyard, Ling Tian was pleased. If he intended to secretly train up a group of elite soldiers, this would be the best place to do so. First was that this place was easy to defend and hard to attack. Secondly, this place was less than 20 miles away from the capital, not too far away from his own Ling residence. As for the problem of silver, it seemed like Ling Tian was not too concerned about it, as though his own assets were being thrown out like flowers blossoming. The only problem was that he could not attract anyone with ambitions over here. Furrowing his brows, Ling Tian thought of half a day before finally laughing wickedly to himself. Looks like he had to ask his grandfather to abuse his official authority for his own private interests, and build another Ling family courtyard. Since his actions would never be low-key, then, might as well blow the whole matter up. If he were to secretly construct such a huge courtyard residence, this would bring about suspicion as well as criticism. However, if he were to brazenly do so, there would instead be nobody gossiping. For the Ling family's current position, building another courtyard was no big matter. However, he had to trouble his grandmother again, and this might lead to her unearthing more secrets about him. The only difference now was that Ling Tian was no longer scared since he had a baseless master behind the scenes to fall back on. No matter what it was, he could just push everything to that master. Ling Tian was finally free from worries. Taking a look at his people, he found all of them wrinkling their noses, and could not help but smile and ask, "Is the smell that bad?" Ling Yi seemed like he was going to wrinkle his nose and eyes together, and replied with a bitter face, "Young noble, this smell is not the best one can sniff. This smell is thicker than the latrine in the army camps." Feng Mo held his nose, and spoke approvingly, "That's right, the smell here is more complex." Ling Yi was astounded. "Complex? Don't tell me the latrine smell is pure and clean?" Hearing those two fellows actually start debating about the smell of the latrine, the audience felt their stomachs rolling. A few of the Blood Iron warriors as well as the bodyguards started to verbally abuse them. Ling Tian guffawed in laughter, before making his way out, saying, "You guys can slowly discuss, the rest of us will move out of here first. Who would want to stay any longer in this type of place?" As such, the group all followed Ling Tian, rushing towards the outside like a swarm of bees. Just as they were about to step out of the courtyard, Ling Tian suddenly halted in his steps. On his left, a tiny and frail silhouette staggered out in front of the crowd's eyes. With her head lowered and waist bent, as though searching for something on the ground. As the sun had just set, there was still a thread of light to be seen. Everyone saw clearly that it was a roughly 7 to 8-year-old skinny little girl, with an emaciated body almost bereft of strength. She swayed as she dug around the piled-up snow, holding on to a sharp piece of roof tile in her hand. Ling Tian could guarantee that this little girl was searching for wild roots that could sate her hunger, from those few grasses she was clutching in her right hand. He drew in a deep breath. At this current freezing weather, how could there still have wild vegetables? In that moment, Ling Tian felt as though he was reliving his past life. It was the 2 years after being crippled, where he was expelled out of his house. He who was full of injuries had not a penny to his name. While he tried to find work, trying to eke out a living, he was always rejected. It was only later on that he found out, Ling Zhao had actually warned all the businessmen that if anyone were to help Ling Tian, they would receive the aftermath of the Ling family's fury. Under such circumstances, who would be willing to help him? The only person who had pitied Ling Tian and given him 3 steamed buns, that old man had his legs broken. Later on, Ling Tian was filled with vengeance in his heart. Spurred on by it, he chose to beg in order to survive to get his revenge. However, even when he was begging, the surrounding beggars also came to disrupt him, banishing him from that area. Furthermore, Ling Zhao and his men came every few days to humiliate him, to scold and beat him. That 2 years, there was not a single day where Ling Tian's wounds ever healed. In the end, Ling Tian's hunger knew no bounds. In order to survive, he behaved like a tramp, huddling in a corner of a market, enduring the criticism and disdain of people, to collect those thrown-away vegetables to allay his hunger. This kind of lifestyle, he actually lived for 2 years. Seeing this little girl, it was as if he was looking at a mirror image of himself in his past life. Ling Tian stood there in a daze, his eyes full of unshed tears. Everyone just saw Ling Tian suddenly stopping, dumbly staring at that little girl. Their faces all revealed expressions of sympathy and could not help but accompany him silently. All of them were thinking, to think this domineering young master would actually have his moments of compassion? Ling Tian sighed, before saying, "Bring the little girl over."